start that live first, and I will just get us on the screen real quickly. And let me get the right shot there. Oh, and the wrong thing. There we go. And hi, everyone. Welcome to Life Edge, where life just doesn't have to be mediocre. What? Oh, can you fix that one real quick? We have to fix one of our shots. We made a show change last week that we didn't realize was still there. But we know how to fix it.
Can you hear me? Because I just got a message that there's some kind of internet connection problem.
Oh, no, you sound good.
Okay, good.
Sometimes you get that message when bandwidth drops momentarily.
Oh, yeah.
And usually it comes right back. So we're fixing that one shot. Okay, so we're good on that. And there we go. We've got everybody. Okay, so if you're out there watching live, we've got with us Ann Shaw. She's from 21st Century Schools. And she's right in that middle power position. So she's running this right now. Then we've got Susan Nash. She is Dr. Susan Nash, who is joining us, our co-host, good friend. And, oh my gosh, she's got so many accomplishments. I don't know where to start. But
no,
you're amazing.
Good to be here. No, you are.
And so we're going to start the show. I'm going to do one change here. So we're going to switch the shot. We're going to start on this shot. So you and I will start the show. Then we will introduce Ann. And let me go to this shot and set up the intro. And we are going to start the recording in 3, 2, and 1. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Life Edge, because life, just doesn't have to be mediocre. And one of the least mediocre people I know is right next to me, not too far away, maybe 2,000 miles or so. And that is Dr. Susan Nash. Hey, Susan, how are you?
Oh, I'm great. It's great to be here. And we have a great guest, too.
We do. So here's our intro, and then we'll start. And Susan, would you love to do the honors?
I would. Thanks, Rick. Today our guest is Ann Shaw. She's in Austin, Texas, and she's the founder and prime motivator, etc., of 21st Century Schools. Welcome, Ann.
Hi, thank you. I'm glad to be here today.
Great. Well, I thought we could start by just asking you a little bit about your background. How did you get started in education?
Sorry?
How did you get started in education?
Oh, very long time ago, I began as an elementary teacher in Oklahoma. Actually at a little school called Tiowa, just outside Claremore. Very small country school. We had kindergarten through 8th grade with just under 100 students, 2 grade levels per classroom, except for kindergarten, 1st and 2nd. So I began in a very traditional setting, coming out of the Northeastern Oklahoma State University in Tahlequah, and started teaching in a very traditional way, the only way that I had ever known or had ever seen. And after a couple of years, I stopped teaching and stayed home to be a full-time mom. Then later I opened a preschool, and as I began researching early childhood strategies, I discovered all kinds of things I had never seen before. And later when I went back into the elementary classroom as a teacher, I took all that with me. So that's when we began doing very active things and getting kids to be self-directed and just trying to find ways to make school more interesting and fun for the kids.
So when you were trying these things in the early stages of being a teacher, were you still in Oklahoma or were you in a different location?
I was in a different location later. I actually had moved to Texas by then. and I went to start teaching at a school in Victoria at a private, small private school, and I started trying all these great things, and the headmaster wasn't very pleased. He wanted me to put the kids in rows and make them sit down and be quiet and lecture, and I wouldn't do it. I was finding all these fantastic things to do that were so exciting. That's when I discovered a program also called Move It Math, which is part of our summer institute that we're offering. And a parent came to me and told me she was taking a course at the University of Houston on this program, and she's so excited about it. And she wanted me to go see it, so I called the professor and we went down to visit their pilot program. We walked into a very large room where there were math centers set up around the room, and little groups of kindergartners were going from one center to the next, doing whatever math was set up for them there, and a little fifth grader at each one to help them. And I saw kindergarten children doing the most amazing things I had ever seen in math. They were doing algebra, they were doing geometry, they were adding big problems that came into the millions, they were converting fractions to decimals, they were adding and subtracting mixed fractions, they were doing amazing things. And so I took all that back to my classroom immediately, and I've used it ever since and recommended it to every teacher I meet. It's for elementary school. So as I began, I went to teach in another town, since the headmaster at the little private school did not approve of my math. He pulled me into the office and he said, I was teaching first grade, and he said, the second grade teacher is very upset. She doesn't know what she will teach them when they get to her next year. You are teaching them too much, and I want you to stop. I said, no, I'm not going to do that. So we parted ways. Yeah, when I went to Port Lavaca, I was embraced and supported by a wonderful administration there on the campus and in the school district. And began teaming with another teacher. And I noticed that the curriculum was very traditional. Let's get out your basal reader, read the story, answer the questions at the end. Okay, let's put that away. Now let's get out your science textbook and go through the chapter, put that away. Now let's do, math. It was very textbook driven, and the kids were bored. And I was bored. So we began to brainstorm ways of what can we do to make school more interesting and get these kids more engaged. They were bored, and these were fourth graders, by the way. And we found that their boredom caused some problems with discipline. So we were dealing with a lot of those issues. And eventually, I developed what I now call my project-based learning. And it's a very interdisciplinary, very research-driven curriculum. We did not use textbooks. And the kids learned very many thinking skills. They learned organizational strategies. And they were very self-directed. They were independent, and they worked interdependently. And that's when we moved from the teacher at the front of the classroom talking to the class. By the way, had all the desks taken out of the classroom. So the front half had some tables, and the back half had other areas where they could go. We had a place called No Man's Land, where it was sectioned off with little bookcases, and up to 3 students could go in there at a time. And that is where, if somebody was in no man's land, you did not go bother them. That's where they could go to focus or think or concentrate on something they were doing. It was very active. Kids were moving around all over the place, and they were all 100% engaged. And then we just had a great big rug in the other corner where we used for various things. So that's eventually where we just started trying new things, and the kids were working at very high levels. It wasn't just little basic skills. It wasn't just marching through the standards. It was really engaging.
Anne, one thing I find real interesting about what you just said is that corporations more and more are now adopting that reverse classroom where you're not just standing for 8 hours teaching somebody for 4 weeks or 5 weeks and 6 as they come up to speed so they can work in that corporation. The teachers are heading to the back of the room or working with the students, the employees all over the room, and they're breaking into groups. They're breaking. So it's funny how our adults have now finally become fourth graders.
All right. Well, that is
I
really
like
good
that.
news, because that is not happening in the schools.
No, that's the sad part, because I was going to ask you too. What you're saying sounds really wonderful. It sounds like you're doing what should be done to keep the kids motivated, engaged, tax their brains a little bit rather than just make them sit and listen to teachers who often aren't even qualified. What happens after they leave your class or leave schools to do that? They wind up back in the regular system where it's all over again. And
I know, it
what-
is sad, and one of the things I did at the beginning of the school year, people started hearing that we didn't use textbooks in my classroom. I didn't assign homework. And the kids would go out on the playground and they'd tell all the other kids, we don't do work in Miss Shaw's class. And they were doing incredible high levels of work. They were writing research papers. They were doing high levels of everything. But they were having such a good time that they didn't think they were working. So some parents started hearing about this, and some of them would call the school and they'd say, we want our child in her classroom, or we do not want our child in her classroom because she doesn't use textbooks, and we're very worried about that. Our kids aren't going to learn anything. So I started having a parent workshop at the beginning of the school year in my classroom, and I explained to them what we were doing, how we were doing it, why we were doing it. I gave them a copy of the first project that I did, 6-week projects that were interdisciplinary, and I gave them a copy of the project. I gave them a copy of all the standards for that grade level and showed them all the ones that they would be learning. And once the parents saw this, they were very open to it. But maybe one, I would have one per year that said, no, I think I want my child in a traditional classroom. So one of the things that I loved at the end of the school year, I did not worry a lot about standardized tests. And in Texas back then, this was a long time ago, we already had the what I call standardized testing mania happening in Texas. And people were feeling a lot of pressure to have their kids perform on the test. But we did a little bit, about 15 to 30 minutes a day of what I would call test prep, and then we didn't worry about it. So at the end of the year, the kids took their test, and I asked them to not stress about it. Just do your best. And a couple of the teachers at our school came to me at the end of the year after all the tests had come back. And they said, Ann, we have to tell you, we were really worried about how your kids are going to do on the test, because it seems like your kids are just jumping through the windows, which they weren't. But to them, if the kids weren't sitting in a seat being quiet, being still, they were going crazy. And they weren't. They were just really working hard. But it turned out that my students scored higher on the standardized test than any of the classrooms in the school. We had 16 classrooms, 8 were 4th grade, 8 were 5th grade. My class had none of the kids that they call gifted and talented. They had regular students. We had a few special ed in there. We had students that about half of them or a third of them were English as second language. So these kids had come into the school that year, 9 years old, already believing that they were stupid, believing they were losers and that they could not make good grades. And I said, no, you will make good grades. Nobody in here will make less than a B. And probably today I would say an A. And they didn't believe me. I just pushed them and showed them. And once they saw they could do something, they were willing to try to go something else more challenging. It was like an upward spiral.
Right. And you know what's interesting about that is, to me, standardized testings are creating equal stupidity. So we're all stupid. That's the whole idea. Oh, great, we're all stupid. Now you're controllable.
Right.
That's not education, and that's not giving these kids an ability to have a good job one day or anything else. They're, like you said, they're brainwashed into saying, I'm stupid. And they believe
Yeah.
it because they haven't succeeded on some stupid test that really doesn't prove anything. I'll give you an example. When I got into the workforce, I went to apply at some programming company. I was a programmer then. And they gave me a psychological test. And I looked at the guy and I said, you do realize that on any given day I could pass or fail this, or today I could be something, tomorrow I'll be something else, whatever your DSM 2 or 3 says, and it proves nothing. And the guy says, so you're antisocial. I go, oh, you can call me whatever you want, but, and I took the test, and he says, you didn't do well on the math part. I go, I rushed through the math part. He goes, but you did well in English. How come? Because I rushed through the math part, and I didn't rush through I knew the English well. My math,
Yes.
even though I was an engineering major at one point, wasn't as good, or I didn't have as much interest in what he was asking. And at the end I said, look, it doesn't matter what you've taken on this test. The end result is, as a programmer, I can program. If you don't want a programmer, then you just wasted $500 on this company's time. And he goes, well, you're just very radical. I go, I'm not radical. I'm just telling you the truth. You don't like it, too bad. And I didn't get the job, and that's okay. I got a better job the next week from a different company, another company that didn't test us. But it's funny. That's what they're looking for, tests to prove that you can do what they think you can do, not what you can really do.
Well, I've had to, like almost all the different places I've worked, we've had to do different kinds of tests. And usually they have to do with the types of things where they tell you what your different attributes are. There are the kind of different Jungian ones. But I just find that they tend to be deterministic, and you start thinking, oh, I'm this or that, and that label, and you completely forget what Anne was talking about, like the whole project-based something or another. And I really applaud that approach, just taking a concrete, defined thing that you need to do, and then let the individuals figure out how to get from point A to B. And if you work in a group, then they can figure that out too.
Well, it's interesting. We develop my company develops a lot of e-learning and training, multimedia. And for years, I keep pushing, and this is common knowledge, ask questions that they don't know. And they said, you can't do that, because if you ask them what they don't know, they won't know how to answer it. I go, exactly. They'll think about it. They'll think, ask them what they don't know. Maybe they know more than they think they do, and try to force that out of them gently. Think about it. Think about how you would answer a question to be able to solve the problem. And it's so funny because a lot of people in corporate America, you can't do that, because if you ask them something they don't know, they'll never give you a good answer. I go, I'm not looking for a good answer. I'm looking for a solution. You'd be surprised how much common sense kids have if you let them think. Or I'm talking adults at this point.
Right.
And even the adults go, I don't know that. Well, what would you do? I don't know. Well, what if you had no choice? You're on a desert island. If you don't know how to solve this problem, you die. What would you do? Well, I think about it. Well, think about it then. And you try to get them into a point where they stop just repeating like parrots and think about it. Use a little bit of critical thinking, which unfortunately they're not teaching in schools. And so what I'm hearing that you're doing, and is just absolutely wonderful. It's how we should be teaching kids. And now, how does it work with kids? Like, for example, you've got Montessori and Cardin. Those methods work on bright kids. They don't work on a lot of kids who aren't really motivated or socially inept or anything like that. But they work on bright kids. How did your methods work on most kids?
They work on all of them. Actually, I would say the only problem I ever had with any child in this environment was one, we teamed up with another class that had some of the children who were identified as gifted and talented. And one little boy, because he was gifted and talented, refused to work with any of the other students. I just couldn't get him to cooperate at all with that. But the ones that excel are all of them.
Good.
I had some children in my classroom that weren't designated gifted and talented, but they were extremely bright. And the wonderful thing that they had a lot of choice and voice in what they did within this project. So, for example, every 6 weeks project, and I did them for that length of time because that was a report card grading period. So it was a nice period of time where we could go very deeply into something and really, really explore it. and do wonderful things. And then we still had 5 more opportunities for the rest of the school year to do something completely different. And it was very easy to, okay, here are your content standards for this grade level and for each subject area. It was very easy just to pull all those out of the project. They would usually cover anywhere from 50% to 100% of the standards in any content area in each project. When they bundled them together and did some kind of activity or research, then they got through them much more quickly, more deeply, and they learned them. They didn't just, as you probably experienced when you were in school, you read the chapter, you work through the chapter, and you do the activities or the questions at the end of the chapter, and then you go to the next chapter and you're just marching through the standards, and it was connected to nothing. One of the things I want to see changed in education today is the way the whole school system is organized. The whole structure is very, what I call factory model. And it was designed for the 1900s and into the 20th century, at a time when the whole world was a very different place. That what the students are going to need to know and be able to do by the time they get out of school are not met. They're not prepared by what we're doing. We're still doing the old stuff. And there have been reforms after reform, and nothing really changes. And I think it's because the organizational structure is there, and they're not looking at that and trying to change it. One of the things that I object to that I think is a problem is what I have started calling the Pac-Man curriculum. Pac-Man goes into the maze and he races through the maze and gobbles as many dots as he can. And what we have our students doing every day is going to school and going to a 45-minute class period, and they gobble up as many content standards as they can, as quickly as they can. The teacher wants to get through the textbook by the end of the semester or the end of the year, and there's no time to do projects because we have to cover all this content. So the students go to the one class and they sit through it and gobble up as many content standards, and then they go to the next class and the next. None of the classes are connected to each other.
Right.
None of them are connected to anything in the real world, and they're not relevant. And a big problem we're having now is that kids are bored, and they see education as a waste of their time. They don't see any relevance, and that's why so many are dropping out.
And the sad
Well,
thing is,
I
Don't
think
drop
also-
out, aren't engaged.
Well, true, and also I think that leads to a lot of the addiction to social media and bullying through social media. But I have a question. What exactly is 21st Century Schools?
It is my company, and we do services for schools, working with teachers mostly, and sometimes with principals, curriculum directors, and superintendents. And we do professional development and curriculum design, mostly focusing on the kind of curriculum that I've sort of been describing since we've been talking, and teach teachers strategies for how to implement this kind of thing in their classroom. I've been doing this off and on mostly since 1990. And over the years, I have noticed a big change in the teachers. For a long time, they were so excited and really eating it up and getting busy and planning and creating all these projects and plugging in all the strategies. And when NCLB came along in about 2002 or 3, that started changing. And the pressure for standardized test scores is mounting. And I started hearing, well, that's nice, but I've got to get my kids ready for the test. And now what I'm seeing is the new teachers coming out of the university have lived almost their whole lives knowing nothing of education other than NCLB test prep and testing. And
That's scary.
I used to think that the young people were the most idealistic and most radical, want to create change and make it great. And I'm finding these young teachers to be sometimes absolutely angry.
Oh yeah.
Oh, no, we're not going to do that. They've never experienced it even.
Well, yeah, I think
I
part
was-
of the problem is they've been propagandized in school for 18 years of their life
That's right.
nowadays, and so they don't have a lot of critical thinking at all. They haven't been taught to think. They haven't been taught to really teach, and
Yes.
all they teach is what they've been told to teach. So nobody's thinking about it, and yeah, that's a great path towards not good, or like they say, no bueno, not bueno at all.
I really hope we can create some change.
Yeah.
And I'm doing everything I can think of to try to make that happen.
Yeah, that's good. And we need people like you because, frankly, it's pretty much a desolate wasteland right now in education. And I keep saying, and I know Susan would probably argue with me, but I think we should burn the whole college system down and start over, fresh.
Hey.
Teach skills and abilities and make
There are
them.
a lot of people that think that. We should just
And it's not
scrap
because I don't like
start
education. I love education. I don't like what they're doing. When you watch TV and you watch all these crazy people rioting and they're not protesting, rioting, and what they're talking about is stifling anybody's ability to say something unless you agree with them. That's not education.
Right.
I mean, what happened to colleges having the ability to each argue with each other and maybe come up with a good solution? No. That's a little scary, what we're seeing right now, and that correlates exactly with what you're saying, that the teachers come out angry. They've got one thing in mind. They're not teaching. There are good teachers, but there's a lot who are just basically robots doing what they're told to do. And
Right, and they're treating the kids that way too.
yeah, and it's a little scary. I mean, I know Susan probably agrees with everything you're saying and then some, because she's
I do.
Yeah.
At the same time, though, I understand why some of the colleges have been forced, basically, to go into things that are kind of rigid, test-based, whatever. And a lot of it has to do with the for-profit scandal.
Yep.
And some of the just egregious problems, which is kind of, to me, an unintended consequence of putting more money in the system to try to help get through the global economic crisis. And so, you got more student loans, and the cap was lifted, but then of course what it turns into is like a gravy train for opportunistic. Not every single one was bad, but it was enough to ruin it for everybody.
well, yeah. The minute the government took over the student loan process, it was all over, because now they're getting people into extremely high loans for careers that have no job opportunity whatsoever. And then they go, I have a $70,000 or $100,000 loan, and there's not a lot of need for what I do. And of course, the students never look to see if there's any job possibilities afterwards. And the colleges say, sure, you'll get a $100,000 job minimum when you graduate with this degree. And there's just not a lot going on for advanced basket weaving or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, they're taking classes that mean nothing, at least as far as having a job ever. And
I like classes that mean nothing, though. To me,
well,
I
no,
think
you
it's important
do,
to
and I
take a
know,
lot
and I
of
don't
those.
disagree with that. But when you're paying $100,000 or $200,000
yeah.
in student loans, and then you graduate and realize, there's no
Right.
Can't
job.
pay.
Yeah, how am I going to pay this back? And
Right,
they're not.
right.
Yeah,
Well,
and
that's true. That's
and you
true,
can't
but
go
I mean that-
bankrupt on a student loan.
But I think that there are a couple of problems, because like I see this in technology and science. I see this in say the oil industry. The technology is changing so quickly that it's very difficult for things to stay relevant, and the universities have a very difficult time actually finding anything that students are going to be able to implement. So they have to go with the fundamentals, and I think learning how to think, but then, when Anne talks about projects, I think the way to solve all of that is to try projects that even outstrip the professor's abilities, but they have to go scramble for the ability to learn, teach themselves how to code, teach themselves how to do like a big data framework or whatever they want to do.
Now, Susan, that's something that goes to another issue in academia, and that's ego. Most professors can never admit that they don't know everything. And there are kids who sometimes will surprise you, and they're very bright, and they'll come up with solutions the professor didn't come up with, and the professor doesn't like them because they're not their solutions. And so that's kind of part of what you're dealing with too. And it's a tough problem to solve, and it's not going to be solved quickly. But I think things that people like Anne are doing are just wonderful first steps to common sense education.
There are some good schools out there, but there are very few of them. And they do the kinds of things that I'm talking about. I've been to some of them. Others I've just read about or watched videos of the things that they're doing that are fantastic. And I always try to share those with people so that I'm not coming to the teachers and saying, well, do this because I said so, because look at all these other schools that are doing it and look how well it works. And so they just say, well, we couldn't possibly do that. Well, we don't have that kind of money, and those schools don't have any more money than anybody else. They're public funded, same amount of funding. It's just that their teachers think differently and do things differently and give kids the freedom to explore and really investigate and do fantastic things. I can give you an example of a school, a science teacher. It was high school. I think they were 10th graders. And he taught a science course that was actually several sciences. I'm trying to remember the biology, and I can't remember the other ones right off the top of my head right now. But the project was these kids were trying to figure out how to identify bushmeat by DNA barcoding.
Cool.
And they created the process. And they were doing this because of all the animal poaching problem in Africa. So this school was in California, but when they got done with the project and developed this process, then a bunch of them actually traveled to Africa with their teacher, and they worked with the wildlife game people. I don't remember what they called, the ones that go out and catch the poachers. And they taught them this method and how to do it, and so they started using it. And then when the kids got back home, they created a documentary about the whole thing from when they started the process of trying to create the DNA barcoding till the end when they went over to Africa and made a real difference.
That's pretty cool.
That's amazing. I love it.
Now we are unfortunately at the end of our show.
Okay.
And we'd love to have you back on.
I would love to.
I think we're only touching the tip of the iceberg here.
I agree, and you've been great.
Oh, and by the way, for everybody watching, not only is she a good teacher and educator, she figured out how to load Skype in less than 10 minutes on her own and got it working. That's an A+ right there. So
thank you very much.
I'm impressed. You don't know how many people have just trouble with that. But no, it's been a real pleasure, and it's nice talking about education in intelligent ways rather than just, we need more money. It's not money. I mean, most of the money goes to the administrators. It never goes to the actual educators. I live in California. I know what it's like. It's awful. We have one of the worst school systems in the probably world.
And it used to be the best, or really, really good.
Where, California?
Yeah,
in high school, we're rated
good?
as probably, I think we're 48 or 49. It's really bad.
But it used to be good.
A long time ago, probably about 30, 40 years, we were better. But it's been going down a lot, and it's pretty bad. And of course, and we have high unemployment too. I wonder why. Nobody can get jobs. It's scary. But no, we'd definitely like to have you back on and talk more about this and see what else people can do to kind of get on this train to really get something done. And that'll be good. Well, Susan,
I appreciate your support in getting the word out to more schools.
Yeah, and we'll get this show out too, so people can at least get an idea of where, places to start and things to look at. If people want to get a hold of you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
My website, 21stcenturyschools.com. My email, director@21stcenturyschools.com.
Okay.
And if anybody would like to, we are offering a summer institute in San Antonio at the Riverwalk this summer, and they can come and create some of these projects and be ready to start the school year next year with a fantastic high-level project that will go beyond the Common Core.
That's fun, and Riverwalk is fun too.
Oh, I love the Riverwalk. That's great.
It's very pretty out there.
It's gorgeous.
Well, again, thank you so much for coming on, and Susan, as always, we look forward to seeing you next time. And for all you people watching, pay attention. This is good stuff. We'll talk to you next time. Have a good one, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Ann.